Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something a bit different, actually quite creative.
So, instead of the usual articles or studies, our sources today are basically snippets from this piece. It paints the whole online world as this kind of wild stadium battle.
It's a satire called Battle of the Blogs. I think like a really hyped up sports commentary. Okay, but the actual game, it's all about online content, how it's made, and who tries to control it.
It's a really interesting take, turning this whole shift in information into a kind of competitive game. So, our mission here, in this deep dive, is really to unpack that framing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Like, who does the source say the players are? What are they actually doing on this metaphorical field?
And what does the article claim at stake in this whole brawl?
Right. So, first up, the teams. According to this piece, we've got two main sides. On one side, the source calls them the jumping bloggers.
Described as like super hyper quick to jump to conclusions, maybe. Yeah. Their crowd, their fans. Basically anyone with Wi-Fi.
Wow. Okay. So, very immediate, very widespread reach implied there.
Definitely paints a picture, doesn't it? Fast moving, maybe a little chaotic.
It certainly does. And, facing them, the source calls. The other side, the political mix. They're described as the old school media. The article gets pretty specific, actually points out.
They're funded by taxpayer cash. Portrays them as kind of bossy. And even throws in these little details, like maybe they have golden parachutes or chauffeurs.
Okay. So it's really setting up a contrast there.
Definitely gives you a sense of the source's perspective on that side. It's not subtle political mix.
That's quite a label. So, how does the source say these two groups actually, clash? What's the action in this brawl?
The way the source frames it is, the bloggers are scoring points, and they do this by, and I'm quoting loosely here,
Totally exposing their fake news. Exposing fake news. So the dynamic is really presented as bloggers actively digging up and publicizing what they see as errors or biases in traditional reporting.
Right. Making it public sounds pretty intense.
So how does the other side, the Politico mix, how do they react to this? According to the source
describes their reaction pretty bluntly. It just says they're whining. So it's clear the article isn't suggesting some kind of, high-minded debate.
it's framed more like a petulant response to being called out.
Okay. So, with all this scoring and, whining, there must be a ref, right? Who does the source say is overseeing this blogcasting brawl?
Good question. The article calls them the gatekeeper. And the source suggests this gatekeeper, this referee figure, is now, quote, letting the bloggers play with the big kids.
So that's a big shift then.
it implies a pretty significant shift. Yeah. Like the traditional powers,
The ones who used to control information flow are now having to acknowledge the bloggers. Or maybe just grudgingly let them onto the field.
That transition point, the gatekeeper, letting them in, feels really key.
So what does the source ultimately see as the impact, the outcome of this whole brawl?
Well, the piece presents the impact of these bloggers as, quite disruptive. The commentator and the source seems to think they're a genuine menace to the establishment. Actively forcing change in how media works, a menace.
But interestingly, they also acknowledge the other side of the coin, that maybe the bloggers are just being annoying, just churning out clickbait.
It's potentially transformative or maybe just irritating, depends on your view, I guess.
Exactly. The source sort of leaves both possibilities hanging there.
It really does boil down to what the source calls it. A battle of the ages, a fundamental clash over how information gets made, who controls it, and how we end up consuming it.
absolutely. And this battle frames so vividly as a brawl. It matters a lot to you, the listener. Because the way this game plays out directly affects the information you get, the different viewpoints you're exposed to, who you decide to trust,
and ultimately, what you believe about what's going on in the world. So yeah, the source calls it a war of words.
Thinking about this blog test brawl analogy, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this kind of framing mean for the future of actually being well informed? And in this ongoing game, who do you think is keeping score? And who ultimately decides who wins? Definitely something to mull over as you navigate your own news feeds.